I wasn't supposed to be here. Not at this table, not in this hotel, and certainly not among the very people who once called me trash. 5 years ago, I walked out of the Griffin family estate with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. They erased me, said I was unworthy of their son, unworthy of their name, and most certainly unworthy of their fortune. Tonight, they're gathered at Astoria, grand celebrating Isabel's birthday, in the most opulent private dining suite money can buy. They don't know I'm the one who owns this place now. They don't recognize me in this tailored navy dress. No longer the housekeeper's daughter or the failed daughter-in-law. My name is Naomi Clark. And before the night ends, they'll remember exactly who I am, not because I demanded it, but because I built something they can't ignore. Not anymore. The maitre d' greeted me with a nod the moment I stepped through the staff entrance zone I still instinctively used, even though I now had full ownership. Astoria Grand was no longer just a name etched on the glass above the lobby. It was mine. Purchased, quietly, restructured privately, and transformed with my fingerprints on every finish, every scent in the air, every policy about how guests were treated, especially those who came from nowhere, like I once did. I took a breath, smoothing down my dress, and headed for the private wing, table 9, reserved under Griffin. Of course, they chose the most exclusive room. Of course, they had no idea who signed the approval form for that reservation. The irony tasted better than any wine they'd ordered. From the hallway, I could already hear their laughter, the polished, hollow kind that covers tension like perfume over rot. I hadn't heard that laugh since the day I left their son, Marcus Griffin, standing dumbstruck in front of the family lawyer, divorce papers in one hand, his pride in the other. He didn't follow me. None of them did. They had called me trash that day. Not directly, but when Mrs. Griffin pulled me aside and whispered, "You should be grateful we even let someone like you into this family," I felt it as deeply as if she had screamed it. Tonight, I would sit just a few feet away from that same woman. Only this time, the power wouldn't be hers. "Boss," Leo whispered as he passed me in the hall, a server tray in hand. "Everything's set. We've briefed the staff. Mai's ready to bring the wine list when you give the signal." "Thanks," I murmured. "Just don't call me boss in front of them yet." He gave me a subtle grin and disappeared. I walked, slowly, each step bringing me closer to a past that had tried to bury me. Inside the private dining room, the Griffins sat like royalty. Mr. Griffin in a tailored grey suit, sipping from a crystal glass. Isabel, the new daughter-in-law, to be, swiping through her phone with the disinterest of someone who'd never worked a shift in her life. Marcus, my ex-husband, slightly heavier now, still obsessed with the optics of success. And their friends, all dripping with designer labels and entitlement. No one noticed me at first. Why would they? The last time they saw me, I was wearing a faded sweater and flats, begging to keep my job and my dignity. Now I walked in like I belonged because I did. A moment later, Isabel glanced up, her perfectly manicured eyebrows rising. "Oh," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "I didn't know they let the help dine in this wing." My heels didn't falter. "Sorry," she added, with a sugary tone. "Did you get lost?" Mr. Griffin chuckled under his breath. Marcus's eyes narrowed, not with recognition, just confusion. I smiled lightly. "No," I said. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The maitre d' appeared beside me, ready to seat me. "Your table is being prepared, Miss Clark," he said smoothly, then turned to the group. "Would you like a moment alone before your guests arrive?" I caught the flicker of uncertainty on Marcus's face. My name had landed, but he didn't connect the dots. "Not yet." I nodded. "That won't be necessary. I think I'll stay just for a few minutes." I walked to the corner, took the seat nearest the window, and waited. The air in the room wasn't so thick yet, but it would be. Soon. They had called me trash once. Tonight, I wouldn't need to speak much to prove how wrong they were. I had something better than words now. I had receipts. They didn't remember me. Not really. I watched Isabel whisper something to Marcus, followed by a quick glance in my direction. She let out a short, laugh, sharp, dismissive, the kind that cuts without effort. Marcus didn't look again. He never did like confrontation, especially if it threatened his carefully managed image. Mrs. Griffin, however, leaned forward, inspecting me through the lens of social currency. She tilted her head, then offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Are you here with someone, dear?" she asked. "Or working tonight?" I met her gaze, steady. "Neither. I'm just here for dinner." "Oh," she said lightly, like she'd stepped on something unpleasant. "Well, the staff here is lovely. I'm sure they'll take good care of you." Leo arrived to take their orders. His professionalism was flawless, but I caught the subtle twitch at the corner of his mouth as he recognized the growing tension. Mrs. Griffin ordered the halibut. Marcus asked for the fillet, medium well, still predictable. Isabel requested the vegan tasting menu, making a dramatic face as if sacrificing for the planet. "And for you, ma'am?" Leo turned to me. "I'll have the house menu," I said calmly. "Let the chef decide." A hush, brief but telling. Not many guests outside our investor circle knew about the house menu and off-list sequence, only prepared by head chefs or trusted protégés. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's not on the menu." "It's not," I agreed, taking a sip of water. Mrs. Griffin leaned toward her son. "She looks familiar," she whispered, barely audible, but I caught it. "She's nobody," Isabel said aloud, loud enough to be heard. "Probably one of those influencer types who sneak into private clubs." It stung more than I expected, not because it was true, but because 5 years ago, I would have believed it. Back when I still thought I needed their validation, I let the words settle, choosing silence over defense. The drinks arrived. A 2015 Brunello di Montalcino was served with appropriate ceremony. Mr. Griffin nodded in approval, swirling the glass before lifting it. "To Isabel," he toasted. "May your new year bring more refinement, more grace, and more meaningful connections." She beamed. Marcus added, "And to knowing your place in the world." He said it with a smirk, looking straight at me. He still hadn't figured it out, but something in him sensed discomfort, like a man sitting in a room where the temperature keeps dropping and he can't find the source. I smiled softly. "To growth," I said, lifting my glass. "And to learning who people really are when they think you're beneath them." For a beat, the room stilled. Then the moment passed, covered by a tight laugh from Isabel, a muttered, "Well then," from Mr. Griffin. But I saw Leo pause before leaving the room, eyes flicking toward me like a silent nod. "They're showing you who they still are." I nodded back. The past was rising, not to haunt me, but to fuel me. They hadn't changed, but I had. The first course arrived like a parade of delicate promises, artful, deliberate, and, to them, disposable. Isabel poked at her roasted beet amuse-bouche with visible disdain. "Is this supposed to be a joke?" she said to no one in particular. "I could get more food at a yoga retreat." "The plating is charming," Mrs. Griffin offered diplomatically. "But I do miss the days when restaurants serve real meals." Mr. Griffin grunted. "Form over substance. That's what happens when you let artists run the kitchen." Their laughter wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to slice skin. I glanced at the dish in front of Mione, of Mai's Creations. She'd joined our culinary team 2 years ago, after aging out of the foster system, and had worked her way from prep cook to junior sous chef. That amuse-bouche was the result of months of experimentation. Balanced, bold, humble, and here it was, dismissed like a free sample from a shopping mall. I set my fork down. "You know," I said, voice level, "I once heard a chef say that people who complain about portions often mistake abundance for value." Marcus snorted. "That sounds like something someone says when they can't afford to eat here." I stared at him. Do you know what this place costs? Isabel rolled her eyes. Oh, please. We're not amateurs. Daddy's friend pulled strings to get this reservation. This restaurant has a 5-month wait list. 5 months? We were actually booked out 7. But I kept that to myself. Leo returned, delivering the second course seared scallops with lemon thyme foam and caramelized fennel. He placed each dish with precision, then turned to me. Chef Mai sends her compliments, he said softly. She hopes the flavors speak for themselves. I smiled. They always do. Mr. Griffin cut into his scallop. It's undercooked, he muttered. Isabel didn't touch hers. I don't eat seafood that looks like it came from a pond. Marcus shoved his plate aside. Let's just skip to the steak. Steak. Of course. This wasn't about food, it never had been. It was about power, about reminding the room who belonged and who didn't. They still thought I didn't. 5 years ago, Marcus's mother had invited me to a dinner just like this, same structure, same crystalware, same cutting remarks, hidden beneath polished tones. That was the night she told me I'd embarrass the family by working part-time in a hotel kitchen. The night Marcus said I lacked the refinement to be a griffin. The night they began rewriting my story without my consent. Tonight, they were reading from that same script. Only they didn't realize I had changed the ending. My scallops were perfect, but I barely tasted them. I wasn't here to savor the food. I was here to reclaim the table. By the third course, I stopped pretending to enjoy the food. It wasn't the flavors, those were flawless. The lamb was rested perfectly, the parsnip puree silky, the wine pairing elegant. But my appetite had long been replaced by a different hungerone that had simmered for 5 years. They were still laughing, still sipping vintage wine they barely understood, still tossing words like confetti, never once imagining they might land on someone who remembered every syllable. That waiter keeps looking at you, Isabel remarked, swirling her glass with casual cruelty. You sure you're not part of the service staff? I didn't answer. I didn't flinch. I just breathed. Mrs. Griffin leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. You remind me of someone, she said slowly. Were you ever in hospitality? Marcus looked up, curious now. You do seem familiar. I sipped my wine. I've dabbled. He chuckled. Makes sense. You carry yourself like someone who spent time polishing glasses. A pause. Then, don't take that the wrong way, he added quickly. I respect people who work hard, even if they never quite rise. Something in me tightened. For a long time, I thought closure meant saying everything I never had the courage to before. But now, I realized true closure was letting them talk just long enough to expose themselves. And they were doing a fantastic job. The room shifted slightly when Mai entered, quietly clearing empty plates. Her eyes met mine, calm, confident. She had heard enough from the hallway to know what was coming. She placed the dessert menus down gently. Marcus waved it off. Let's not waste time. Just bring whatever's most expensive. That would be the reserved tasting flight, Mai replied smoothly. It includes a vintage dessert wine and a seasonal trio from the executive pastry team. Perfect, Isabel said. Just don't make it too weird. Of course. Mai left, but not before brushing my shoulder lightly, a silent signal. It was time. Moments later, Leo reappeared with the check. He placed it between Mr. Griffin and Marcus with delicate ceremony, then stepped back. Mr. Griffin reached for it reflexively, but Marcus beat him to it. Let me handle this, he said, with the smug tone of a man about to flaunt his black Amex. He opened the folder, his brow furrowed, then twitched. Excuse me? He called, holding up the leather check holder. There's a mistake. Leo stepped forward, eyes neutral. Yes, sir? You've only charged us for the wine, Marcus said, confused. The food's missing. Leo tilted his head. It's not a mistake, sir. The meal portion was taken care of. By who? I set down my glass. My heartbeat had slowed, my body calm. Every breath in that moment felt earned. Leo turned toward me, eyes warm. By the owner, he said clearly. She insisted. Silence. Mr. Griffin frowned. Isabel blinked. Marcus stared at me. I smiled. Not cruelly, not smugly. Just truthfully. I stood up slowly. Welcome, I said, to the house I built from the scraps you left behind. For the first time all evening, they were quiet. Marcus still held the bill in one hand, though it now hung limply, forgotten. Isabel's lips parted slightly in disbelief, but no sound came out. Mr. Griffin stared at me like I'd just stood up and declared I was the Queen of England. Mrs. Griffin, she adjusted her napkin like it could shield her from what was unraveling. Leo, still beside the table, turned toward me and said with effortless grace, Your usual suite is available, Miss Clark. Would you like the staff to prepare it? I nodded once. After I speak with our guests. He bowed subtly and stepped back. The room had shifted. Permanently. I took my time walking around the table, stopping beside Marcus. It's been a while, I said. He blinked. You, Naomi. His voice cracked like a teenage boy's. I smiled. Still polishing glasses? His face flushed. I don't understand, Isabel said flatly. You're the… what? The event planner? I'm the owner, I replied. CEO of Clark Hospitality Group. We acquired Astoria Grand 11 months ago. I signed off on the remodel of this very suite. Her mouth opened, then closed. Mrs. Griffin's voice found itself first. But you were working in kitchens. You had nothing. I had grit, I said evenly, and a very clear memory of how I was treated. Mr. Griffin leaned back in his chair. Wait, you mean this whole time? Yes, I interrupted. This whole time, while you were mocking the portions, the wine, the staff, you were sitting inside, something I built from the ground up. Marcus's jaw tensed. Why didn't you say anything? Why let us talk like I was beneath you, I offered, because I wanted to see if anything had changed. And? Isabel snapped. I met her eyes. It hadn't. A long pause followed. Then Mrs. Griffin's voice returned, this time lower, more fragile. Naomi, we didn't know. You didn't care to know, I replied. You cut me out, dismissed me, labeled me unworthy because I wasn't born into money. I scrubbed your baseboards while you hosted galas about women's empowerment. My words landed like slow, deliberate blows. Not shouted, not angry, just precise. I left your son not because I wasn't enough for this family, I continued, but because I realized I didn't need to beg for crumbs from a table I was capable of owning. Mr. Griffin cleared his throat. You did all this alone? I turned to him, and for the first time, I let the weight of the past 5 years rise in my voice. After I left, I worked 3 jobs. Line cook by day, delivery driver by night, catering on weekends. I lived in a studio apartment the size of this table. No air conditioning, no backup. Just determination and burns on my arms that never fully healed. I pulled back my sleeve slightly just enough to show a faded scar near my wrist. And while you were toasting at banquets, I said, looking now at Marcus, I was learning the art of systems, of operations, of scaling. I took online business courses after midnight. I pitched to 12 investors before one said yes. I acquired my first hotel at 29. And now, we're in 7 cities. No one spoke. I turned toward Leo, who had silently stepped back into view, holding a thick binder. Your team presentation materials, Miss Clark, he said, handing it to me. I flipped open the folder and pulled out a single sheet. This is the bill, I said, placing it back in front of Marcus. The meal is comped. As always, Our house policy extends complimentary dining to executive guests. Marcus stared at the paper like it might explode. I don't need your Amex, Marcus. I never did. Mrs. Griffin looked visibly pale now, her hand clutched at her pearl necklace. You've really built all of this? I nodded. And more. Isabel scoffed. So what now? You want us to feel bad? No, I said. I want nothing from you. That's the point. Mr. Griffin leaned forward, voice soft. You're remarkable. Truly. Perhaps we judged too quickly. I raised an eyebrow. Perhaps? His cheeks reddened. Isabel folded her arms. So you brought us here to humiliate us? No, I said. You brought yourselves here. I just gave you the space, to be honest. And what will you do now? Marcus asked, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Cut us out the way we cut you out? I looked at him for a long moment. No, I replied, because I've already moved on. I turned to leave. My heels echoed softly against the polished floor. But before I stepped through the doorway, I stopped and looked back once more. You called me trash, I said quietly. But tonight, I gave you grace. They didn't follow. And that silence was worth more than any apology they could have offered. I didn't look back again. Not when the heavy doors closed behind me. Not when the hushed murmur of disbelief rippled across the private dining room like a storm wave breaking too late to matter. I had given them the truth, the context, and the grace they never offered me. And now what remained in that room was theirs to carry. I walked through the staff hallway, every familiar step grounding me. Mai was waiting near the kitchen doors, arms folded, face unreadable. How bad was it? She asked softly. I exhaled, setting the folder of presentation notes on a steel counter. Not bad. Just honest. She nodded. They deserved it. Maybe, I said. But I wasn't there for revenge. I just needed to see if I could face them without shrinking. Did you? I stood taller than I ever have. We didn't say much else. We didn't need to. The kitchen was quiet now. Between shifts, the only sounds were the low hum of refrigeration units and the occasional clink of silver being counted by closing staff. I walked past my old workstation, still nicked along the wood where I used to chop onions until my hands went numb. That was the counter I leaned on after 16-hour shifts. That was the corner where I once fell asleep during a thunderstorm. Apron still on, feet swollen, heart heavy with doubt. I had cried here, bled here, found pieces of myself I never knew existed here. And now, I ran this place. No applause, no trumpets, just steel, steam, and the quiet thrum of purpose. I reached for my phone and opened the messages. There, it was on unread text from Marcus. I'm sorry. Truly. I didn't know how far you'd come. Let me know if there's any chance to talk, just the two of us. I stared at it. Not with anger. Not even resentment. Just clarity. I didn't need to reply. Not today. Let him sit with that silence. Let him feel what it's like to reach across a void and not be answered right away. That had been my reality for years. Mrs. Griffin had also texted. A longer message, trying to weave apology into dignity. We're proud of you, it said at one point. But pride means little when it arrives only after achievement. What would they have said if I was still washing dishes somewhere? If I had never risen? Would I have still been trash? I set the phone down. Across the kitchen, Leo emerged with 2 cups of chamomile tea. He didn't say a word, just handed me one and took a seat nearby. I've never seen you that calm, he said after a moment. Even when the health inspector showed up unannounced last fall. That was easier, I smirked. Mold you can clean. Family? Not so much. He laughed. A low, knowing sound. Think they'll come back? He asked. I shrugged. Maybe, but not as the people they were. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was whole. Because the truth was, I didn't need them to come back. I didn't need an apology shouted from rooftops. I didn't need flowers or headlines or second-hand praise. I had already reclaimed the most important thing they tried to take from me. My narrative. My worth. My voice. They could sit in their silence, grappling with their shock, their shame, their undone assumptions. Meanwhile, I had a business to grow, a mentorship program to launch, a blueprint for my second hotel opening in Charleston, and a life whole, imperfect, mine. 2 weeks passed. Not a single call from Marcus since his last message. No follow-up from Mrs. Griffin. No surprise visits. No bouquets. No press statements spun in their favor. Just silence. And it was glorious. Not because it hurt them, but because it no longer hurt me. Instead, my days filled with new rhythm-searly coffee meetings with my investment team, evenings spent with Chef Mai refining the spring menu, and Saturdays dedicated to something that mattered even more. The Ember Initiative. It wasn't flashy. Just a few hours each weekend where the kitchen transformed from a Michelin-starred engine into a quiet classroom. 8 young women from shelters and halfway homes came in, aprons oversized, eyes wide. Most had never held a chef's knife before. Some still flinched at praise, unsure if it was real. They reminded me of someone I once knew. A girl scrubbing silverware in the Griffin estate, hiding burns on her arms and doubt in her chest. Her name was Naomi, too. Only now, she stood on the other side of the table. Today, I worked one-on-one with Camilla, 17-year-old who never made it past 10th grade, but diced vegetables with an instinct I couldn't teach. Try slicing from the heel of the blade, I said gently, adjusting her grip. She looked up. Like this? Exactly. She beamed. That quiet, stunned smile that happens when someone realizes they're capable of more than survival. Later, during cleanup, she hovered awkwardly. Ms. Clark, you can call me Naomi. She hesitated. Naomi, why are you doing this? Like, you don't have to. You made it. I dried my hands and leaned against the counter. Because no one ever opened a door for me, Camila. They closed them. Slammed them, actually. Called me things I'm still trying to unhear. Her eyes dropped, and I knew she understood. I want to be the kind of person I needed back then, I added. She nodded slowly, quietly. As I watched her leave that day's shoulders a little straighter, steps more certain, I felt something shift inside me. A kind of peace no dining room confrontation could have ever given me. Back in my office, Mai had left a folder on my desk, blueprints for the Charleston expansion. I flipped through them, admiring the details, the intention. On the final page, she'd written a note. Your story didn't stop at proving them wrong. You made it about proving others right. I paused. That's what fire does, doesn't it? It doesn't just destroy, it clears space for new things to grow. The Griffins gave me fire, but I chose what to do with it. I chose to inherit it not as bitterness or revenge but as momentum, as warmth passed forward, as proof that even discarded people carry sparks. And when given oxygen, those sparks can become something unstoppable. The restaurant was quiet again. Dinner service had ended, and the staff was packing up. I stood alone in the main dining room, lights dimmed to that warm, amber glow. I had always loved the one that made even strangers feel like they belonged. I ran my fingers along the edge of table 9. It still bore the tiniest scratch on its leg from opening night. A nervous intern dropped a tray and nearly cried. I hadn't scolded her. I'd helped her pick it up and said, "This isn't a place where perfection is demanded, just care." Funny how far that simple idea had carried us. From scouring floors to owning skylines. From being tossed aside to becoming the one who decides who gets invited in. There had been a time, God, so many years where all I wanted was a seat at someone else's table. Their approval. Their hand pulling out the chair, saying, "You're welcome here now." But now? I had my own table. And more than that, I built a place where others could sit too. Not because of last names or credit scores or who they were married to, but because they had earned it in their spirit. That was the real legacy. Not revenge. Not even recognition. But creation. A voice broke my quiet. "You ready to lock up?" Leo called from the hallway. "Almost," I said, grabbing my coat. "Just taking one last look." He smiled. "Looks good from here." I nodded, heart full but light. It really does. As I turned off the lights, I thought of the girl I used to be standing in the Griffin mansion. Hands raw from bleach, ears ringing from whispered insults. And I thought of the girl who now stood here back straight, vision clear, purpose rooted like oak. The same girl, but not the same woman. I walked out without waiting for permission, validation, or applause. Just peace, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I didn't just earn a seat. I built the whole damn table.